In this video, I'm going to show you how you can get started with Google Forms from a Google Apps for Education account. The first thing that you'll see is I'm working in the new drive. So if you see the Create button over here instead of New, what you can do to change that is come up to the Gears button to access your settings, and you'll see something that says Experience the new drive. That will flip you over to a view that's more in this style, so your screen will match mine exactly. If you are more comfortable in the old drive, you can certainly press Create and then choose Google Forms, etc. And from there, all the steps basically remain the same. So we'll get started here by clicking on the New button and going to More, and then clicking on Google Forms, and that will create a blank Google form. Now, I'm going to do something really simple with just 2 questions, just to give you the basics of Google Forms. The first thing we'll want to do is name our form, so I'll call this one a class survey, and you'll notice that the title of the form changes at the top as well. Now, when you open up your Google form, you'll see these form settings here, and the first one requires that people in your domain be logged in to view this form. And that's great if you want to keep it private and just to people in your school or in your school board. But if you're, say, doing a data management unit and you want to collect data from people in other schools, school boards around the world, parents, etc., or if you're surveying your community, what you're going to want to do is untick that box. And you'll get this note, don't require sign-in, and that will make the form accessible to people outside the wired ESB. You would just click OK, and that would allow anyone to access your form. In this case, I'm going to turn it back on because I want to make use of the second tick box here. The second tick box is to automatically collect usernames from the people who fill out your form. And it can only be done automatically if sign-in is required. So this would be a case where you wanted to be have a higher level of accountability for who filled out your form, ensuring that you collected the student's username meant that they couldn't put in a fake name or someone else's account, etc., etc. So automatically collect the username. The third tick box here, that's for forms and surveys that are multiple pages long, and it just gives people an idea of how far they've gone in the survey. So I'm going to leave it unticked here. The last tick box here might be used for assessment purposes, might be used if you're going to use Google Forms for some voting purposes, and it only allows 1 response per person. And that would come into play if you were voting and you didn't want students to have the opportunity to input a second entry. Now, normally they can. So for some assessment purposes, you might want to give them multiple opportunities to attempt the quiz, the survey, whatever you build in Google Forms. But in this case, I'll leave it on to only allow 1 response per question. And the last tick box would shuffle the question order. And again, that would be for assessment purposes so that not all students are seeing the same questions in the same order. So that's the boxes at the top here. Now, when you start a Google form, it pre-populates it with an untitled multiple choice question. And so in this case, just for illustrative purposes, I'm going to make it a question to ask what grade the students are in. So what grade are you in? And it's multiple choice. They can only be in 1 grade at a time, so I'll leave it like that. And we'll just start with grade 6. And you just enter your options 1 at a time. Okay, so I've got 5 options here where my students could be choosing a different grade. You also, with multiple choice questions, have the ability to have students, parents, whomever enter their own answer if it doesn't match up with the multiple choice options provided. I'm just going to delete that one here. This is also where I can make this a required question so that a student can't submit this form until they actually complete this question here. So when I click done, I see it in a preview what it would look like when it's presented to the student. The next thing that I would do is add a second question, and I like clicking on the drop down arrow beside add item because here I can see all of the different kinds of things that you can add to a Google form. So you can see text would be a short text box, multiple choice would be would allow multiple line entries into a text field. Multiple choice allows them to choose only one of several options, while with tick boxes they can choose several options. Choose from a list is a really good option if you've got longer choice fields or a list, say, of all the schools in the York region, which would be about 200 long. Rating scales and grids allow you to have students rate things on different criteria. And date and time give you some options for those kinds of questions as well. You can also put images and videos into your Google form if you'd like, using these things on the layout. Page breaks and headers allow you to add descriptions or break longer forms into multiple parts. So I'm going to go with a choose from a list option here, and this will be what is your favorite subject. And I'll just put in a few here. And again, I'm using the tab button to advance between fields here. It just makes it a little quicker than clicking each time. Okay, and I'll make that a required question as well. I click done and then I can see it in preview here. Now, if I realize that I want to change a question, all I have to do is click on it and it will open it up in edit mode. So if I want to put grade 5 in here because I'm going to include them, I just go grade 5 and I want to change the order, so I can click on those dots and drag it up to the top and then click done. If I wanted to duplicate a question, I could simply click on this duplicate button here. If I wanted to get rid of it, I click on the trash can to get rid of it. So this is just nice and simple. We'll keep it the way it is. And what I want to see now is, how do students get this form? So one thing you can do is send the form, and if you've got a distribution list or a Google group for your students, you can send it out that way. If you just want to copy the URL, you can go ahead and get that, or you can make it a short URL and copy that. Then open that up in another tab, and you will see your Google form live and in color. So I'm going to go back to my original one. If you want to change the design here, you can click on change the theme and pick something fun. And now another way to get to that live form is to click on view the live form here. And so that's the URL that you want to get to your students somehow. And it doesn't matter how you do it, whether it's by email, whether it's by making a shortcut and writing that on the board, or posting the link to your blog, etc., etc. This is the page you want students to fill out. So I'm going to go ahead and fill it out now, just so you can see what happens with the data. So I'll say that I'm in grade 8 and my favorite subject is science, and then I'll submit this form. And I get this little confirmation message that says, thanks, your response has been recorded. Now, I'm going to go back to the left here and look at my class survey. And what I can see here is that I've got this button to view the responses. And when I click on it, what I see is that all of my responses are put into a spreadsheet. And so I can use that spreadsheet to analyze my data. And it's a little bit out of order here. Don't mess around with the order until you've collected everything. Just leave it the way it is. Another way to look at your data, and it's not going to look really good here because I've only got one response, is to view the summary of responses. And in this way, you're presented with very quick graphs demonstrating where students are at. And you don't get any choice in this, but if you want to use Google Forms for assessment for learning purposes and get a quick idea of how your students respond to certain questions, you can certainly use that option from Google Forms. So that's it for the quick tutorial. And if you have any other questions about Google Forms or how to use them, I encourage you to do a search within Google or on YouTube. There's lots of information out there, and certainly contact people like me, digital literacy resource teacher, or others who are using these forms in their classroom on a regular basis. Thanks a lot.